There is a subject discussed frequently by Melniboné's philosophers concerning the number of worlds in the universe, and how many universes make up the multiverse. Planes is a more common word they employ, since they do not have the notion of worlds as globes. Some believe these can be visited in dreams and reached by the moonbeam roads which run between the worlds. Thus they have developed their sophisticated method of the dream couches, where certain privileged aristocrats lie to dream the dreams of years, centuries, even millennia in a few hours. Elric, who had in his youth learned his sorcerer's skills on the dream couches of Imria, no longer remembered his experience of the moonbeam roads, so the nature of the universe was again a mystery to him, though sometimes a memory would return as a nightmare which would bring him screaming back to wakefulness. After the events recorded in the first volume of this history, Elric determined to explore the lands which surrounded his own, deeming it a matter of common sense to understand the nature of those who, realistically, were planning the destruction of his world and his family with it. In fact, it is likely the young albino was moved as much by curiosity as moral purpose. Yet, who of us at his age is entirely sure of the reason for their actions? Let us accept the reasons he gave and concern ourselves instead with other matters. Elric had one recurring dream which disturbed his nights. He dreamed he returned to a Melniboné made even stranger and more bizarre under his cousin Yerkun's rule. Almost nothing was entirely familiar to him. The great towers of Imria were warped and twisted into a troubling architecture which seemed to reflect the mental states of those gone entirely mad. Unnatural beasts prowled the serpentine streets, and gigantic demonic creatures lolled in the city squares. The palaces had grown huge to accommodate those newcomers, and Melnibonéans were dwarfed to the size of ants in comparison. Where Elric's kinfolk had once lived, now dwelled creatures of cryptic biology, with carapaces encrusted in carbuncular jewels, and organs which throbbed upon the surface of their bodies, with vast, multifaceted eyes which seemed blind and yet looked into worlds no other could see, with a multitude of arms and legs and other limbs whose function was impossible to guess. Bizarre creatures of chaos ran through corridors which had become labyrinths, and in the re-wrought chambers of the towers, Melnibonéans, driven mad by their exposure to these new demons, feasted on unnatural food and pleasured themselves in even stranger ways. Cries of horror and pain were the perpetual music filling this Melniboné. In this dream, Elric made his way to the great throne chamber, where Yerkun, gaunt and crazed, enjoyed intercourse with his demonic allies and lived in a state of perpetual celebration. Clearly he took no delight in Elric's arrival. "Where is your sister?" demanded the albino. "Where is my betrothed?" And Yerkun at last reluctantly sent for her. The woman who came to the throne chamber was only barely recognizable to Elric. She was dressed in heavy clothing encrusted with gold, silver, and platinum. She could barely move, and her eyes were drugged. Little dwarfish creatures carried her train and crept in and out of her clothing, adjusting this, altering that. When she saw Elric, she smiled, and it was a hideous travesty. Clear to Elric that she was under an enchantment. In the dream, Elric led his beloved away from the throne chamber, past ornamental pools where his beloved dragon brothers, the Faun, seemed imprisoned. Once, Flamefang, his closest dragon kin, rose from the coruscating liquid and addressed him. "We are all slaves of chaos now, dear lord. All slaves of this nightmare." But he promised that when Elric and Simorl wished to leave, he would try to carry them on his back to safety. though this stuff which is not water, it corrodes us in such strange ways. Then Elric found himself in a great chamber filled by an enormous bed carved with obscene figures. Silmaril spoke to him in an unfamiliar language. Her love-making was that of a stranger. When he did understand her words, he scarcely understood their meaning. Her tongue was thick, as if she had forgotten the high speech of Melniboné. He told me that Arioch had killed you and eaten your sword. And when Elric looked up through the canopy of that strange bed, he saw eyes he recognized. They were the mocking, triumphant, sardonic eyes of Arioch himself. They lay together in that bridal chamber. Some might have considered it ostentatious, some might have found it terrifying. Elric hardly saw the carvings and the decorations, for he was filled with complex premonitions. "We shall be married now you are returned to Melniboné," said Silmaril. And on those words, always, Elric would awake, wondering in panic if he should not return at once to Melniboné, break his word and reclaim his throne. He feared that his actions had already produced cosmic reverberations of unprecedented significance. But circumstances led him in other directions. Try as he might, he could not find the way home. And eventually he reconciled himself to the fact that his destiny lay elsewhere, that there were things he must do, things he must learn, before he could ever return. In his wakeful moments, when his sense of reality was restored, he told himself that only by mingling with the people of the young kingdoms would he learn what he needed. But as is often the case when the powerful design to learn the secrets of the powerless, his condescension was resented, his company rejected. Like so many before and after him, he discovered what a distance his power put between himself and those he envied. Envy comprised much of what he felt for people he regarded as less complicated souls, leading simpler lives than his own and carrying less complex burdens. Elric was too young, too self-involved to realize that only to him were those problems less complex, and that those he envied actually envied him his power, which, from their particular perspective, would, if possessed by them, entirely simplify and improve their lives. Beyond the walls of Elric's particular plane, the lords of the higher worlds continued to plot and plan not only Elric's fate, but that of his people, their friends and enemies. The machinations of those called gods would lead Elric to explore some of the other worlds of the multiverse, falling into the power of legendary Agak and Gagak, encountering the dead Melnibonéan Earl Saxif Da'an, and learning still more of his people's past, of the mysterious blind captain who steered the ship of fate, and, most importantly, of the eternal champion, of whom he was an avatar. Other avatars he would meet were called Corum, Erekose, Hawkmoon, champions whom some knew as the Three Who Are One before his joining them, whereupon, naturally enough, they became the Four Who Are One. All these men were bound upon quests of their own. All sought fabled Tanalorn, where, it is said, the champion eternal shall find eternal peace. They dreamed of Tanalorn. They desired Tanalorn as some men desired women and others desired wealth. They longed for Tanalorn as a place they had lost, perhaps before they were born, as a place which, like paradise, might not, by definition, exist at all. Tanalorn, some called it the city of eternal rest, beloved of those who welcome death. Some, of a simpler and perhaps more cynical disposition, say it is indeed no more than another name for the grave. But I can tell you that Tanalorn is a powerful dream. It is what causes great heroes and heroines to perform great deeds. It is what raises us above the lords of the higher worlds and makes us, poor mortals that we are, something nobler and more powerful than any who seek to control our destinies. Dream Tanalorn might be to some of us, but to others it is a reality we have moulded from the stuff of imagination, and which stands for all our idealism, all our fine ambitions, all our yearnings, and all our nobler selves. Though we spend many lifetimes seeking Tanalorn, find her at last we shall, and there, as we are promised, we shall know not only peace, but wisdom and security. But the building of that city shall take many great dreams and much courage, and you can be sure that not a single drop of savagely spilled blood will taint a single brick or stone of her. So now begins the second tale of the albino. Forgetting as best he could his cousin Urkun sitting as regent upon the ruby throne of Melniboné, suppressing all thoughts of his beautiful cousin Cimoril, weeping for him and despairing of his ever returning, Elric went to seek an unknown goal in the worlds of the young kingdoms, where Melnibonéans were at best disliked. And it would not be long before he found himself sailing upon the mysterious seas of fate. What he found upon those seas is the substance of this story.